This is Kingston Live, and if you're either a local or longtime listener, you're probably familiar with our guest today. Oakridge Ave is one of those staple bands that inevitably comes up in almost any conversation about current Kingston music. But a lot has changed since the last time we caught up with them. 2023 finds Oakridge Ave a very different band than the one that released Endless Nights in 2020. The spirit of their music is familiar, and their keen sense of melody is still as clear as ever. But there's a new flavor to the songs. Where they once leaned into that classic Canadian rock band sound, blending elements of roots and blues, their new record, Wind Up, Let Go, finds the quintet breaking into new territory. Layers of synthesizers and guitar effects add new texture to their music and broaden their songs into fresh, rich space. Today we're sitting down with the band to talk about their new record, new collaborations, and their new direction. Hello, it's Johnny San. This is Kingston Live. Rob is with me. Hello, Rob.
Hello.
And from Oakridge Ave, we have Sean.
Hey, how's it going?
And Harrison.
Howdy.
Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Happy to be here.
Yes, happy to have you here. It's been a while.
Indeed.
Something I have to comment on before we really get into it. Rob and I were talking about how we've been doing this podcast for almost 5 years now, and it's been really neat in that time watching certain bands, like bands that we had on early in the podcast, grow and progress in those last 5 years.
Oakridge Avenue being one of those bands.
Yeah, exactly. You guys, The Wilderness comes to mind, Tiny Horse, and I like to think we had maybe a little bit, played a small part in that, but no, it's just been so gratifying to see all these bands achieve the success they have and grow artistically the way they have, especially with COVID, because, and I'm sure this crossed your minds, and I want to get your thoughts on that, but just going through a pandemic, even just as a live music listener, you wonder, okay, are these bands going to come back when COVID is done? Because when you're a live band and there's no gigs, I mean, what do you do? But it's been so gratifying to see so many bands like yourself come back so strong after the pandemic.
Well, yeah. I mean, thanks, first of all, for saying so. It feels like we're coming back strong, which is nice because, it's never a guarantee per se. But it's interesting you say that, though, because as soon as things did sort of open up and we did get back into gigging and trying to book shows, our Rolodex of local bands just shrunk so much. And it was a real shame. It felt kind of, it wasn't all just that people, they split up or whatever. It was oftentimes, they moved out of town or got a different job or whatever. But yeah, it was quite something to see that impact on the scene. But as far as I can tell, it's come back with an absolute force. And I think that the scene is really thriving now. I wouldn't necessarily even say that I notice a big difference now from where it was before, barring the fact that the acts and artists have changed and many new ones are on the scene. But I'm very happy to see that, at least.
I think for me, a big sort of turning point, just as an observer of live music, was several weeks back, because another band that started in Kingston is now in Toronto, Lost Cousins. They just went off the radar for most of COVID, and then I thought, are they done? And then they released a new album. It was great, and then you guys were there, which was great. It was just such a great night.
You opened for them at the Mansion on July 15th.
Yeah, yeah, that was such a fun show. We were also really big fans of theirs and had been kind of following what they were doing and sort of waiting for them to come back. They gave us a bit of a breadcrumb trail. Like, they would post pictures or little snippets of them in the studio and then go dark for like 6 months.
Yeah, there were like these little sporadic updates. You're like, are they doing something? What's going on? Yeah. kept teasing us.
I have to ask because as of this interview today, your new album Wind Up Let Go has been out for exactly 4 days. Is that right?
Yeah.
What's the initial reaction been like?
Positive all around. I think people are definitely surprised by the new sound, which we all knew they would be, but surprised in a good way. There's still reviews trickling in. I still have friends that are listening to it that are surprised at the new sound and how the different direction. But it's been great so far, and we're super happy. Everyone loves it, and
are you surprised by the feedback though? Because you'd released a few singles in the lead up to the album being released and stuff, and I know some of them were for fans only, but what were fans telling you when you were releasing those singles?
I mean, we had an inclination that people had kind of caught on that the sound had changed and gone a little bit more pop and synth heavy and just a little bit less, the kind of blues rock roots that we came from back when we made Endless Nights. But I think when the full album dropped, it kind of all crystallized a little bit more and made more sense because the singles that we chose were a little bit sporadic in terms of their style. Like, we kind of wanted to cover a broader range of the record than just what's got the catchiest chorus and the poppiest feel. So Sunburn, as a first single, kind of just made a lot of sense to us, and we felt it was a strong song, and it was definitely that. And then when it came time to pick the second single, Fidelity High just stuck out to us as one that was sonically really interesting and definitely a departure from Sunburn, and kind of just hit on sort of another end of the spectrum that the album is on.
It was a bit of a sneak attack, that one. I think it was one of the last songs we recorded.
It was, yeah.
And the more we worked on the Hawksley works on the mix, and then the more we just sort of put layers into it, it just became one of those songs that everyone was like, wow, this is a banger of a tune. And I think right away after we got the final mix, we all knew it was going to be a song it definitely stood out for sure.
We were just talking before you showed up and kind of exchanging notes. So, what's your favorite song on that? And we both mentioned Sunburn as being on our list. But having just listened to the album, 3 or 4 times in succession, new things are emerging for me that I didn't hear the first time. And so now I'm sort of, I got to change it up. I don't know. Ask me a week and my list is going to be completely different.
That's kind of what we wanted, though. There are a lot of layers in there, too. On first listen, I feel like they are pretty tight and concise, and you can get the idea of the songs on a first listen, but there's a lot of extra details and little counter melodies and things, and Hawksley he loves that. There would often come a time where we had to stop ourselves from adding more and just over impregnating these songs with just way too much detail, but that's cool to hear. I'm glad that you're picking up on that.
Well, your previous album, Endless Nights, was produced by Ian Blurton, and it was released in 2020. And, Ian Blurton, a renowned founder, a member of Change of Heart, Come On, but also a respected producer with an impressive repertoire. He'd produced record for, Lowest of Low, Rio Statics, a whole bunch of bands, Weaker Than's Attack and Black, pretty much all my favorite bands, and Oakridge Ave. But the Endless Nights was such a fantastic album, a different album, but the new album, Wind Up Let Go, produced by Hawksley Workman, another renowned, fantastic producer and artist in his own rights, with an impressive repertoire. He also produced many artists who were pivotal albums for Tegan and Sara, Serena Ryder, Justin Rutledge, Hey Rosetta. But Hawksley hadn't produced a record in a while, and so I want to know what was the attraction there, and how did you end up establishing that relationship with him that led to the collaboration on the new LP?
It was a long one, that one. So right in the thick of lockdowns, I think it was December 2020, I had sort of interacted a little bit with Hawksley on Twitter in the past because he at a time was very active on there and would talk to fans and things. And I still to this day don't exactly know why I had this idea, but I shot him a message and I was like, hey, I'm starting a podcast and I'd really love to have you on as my first guest. And he kind of called my bluff and said, yeah, okay, let's do it. And I was like, damn it, now I actually have to start a podcast. I didn't even have the microphones or anything.
That's right. He was like the first guest on
absolutely the first one.
podcast episode.
Which,
it's called Vinyl Safari, by the way.
Yes, Vinyl Safari.
So track that down, give it a listen.
One season so far. I still have designs to bring it back at some point when the time is right. But I guess when things are a little bit less busy on this front. But yeah, he said yes. I didn't want to go in straight away and say, oh, by the way, I'm But within about, I want to say like 10 to 12 months, we had started to work a lot harder. We want to make another record. Who are we going to talk to? How are we going to do this? And I said, well, I have something of a relationship with Hawksley. He said yes, for some reason. I'm still to this day not sure, but
Very quickly said he was interested, which kind of
for a while, because I remember speaking to him early on the phone, and he was like, yeah, like I've just been thinking like I need to kind of sink my teeth into something new here, and it's funny that you came along at this time because this actually might be just the right thing to do. And I was like, okay, great, that's awesome. I can't really take credit for that, but I'm glad that is the case. And that's sort of, that was the seed of that one.
I remember this past winter being at the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, and before the movies are shown, there's these little promos that come up, and there's one promo with this song, and I was like, hey, this sounds good. And then a few seconds in, I was like, wait, I know that voice. And it was Late Breakfast for Crows, I would later find out. And I was surprised because, it's such a different sound. And comparing it with Endless Nights, two really solid albums, really well produced, but very different energy on both. And Rob and I were talking about that. Like the new album, there's so much more color and space and texture to it. And I'm just wondering, what was the impetus for that? Was that come from you guys, or was it from Hawksley? We talked with Hawksley about it a bit already, but I'm just curious where that came from. Who was the main driver there?
I think it was a bit of both. I think we definitely wanted to do something different than Endless Nights. And with the new additions in the band, I think we all wanted to try and do something that was more, more sounded like what we were listening to at the time. And as a unit, as the four of us, all of us listen to different styles of music, and Thomas and Joe have their own styles that are, a little different than the classics than what me and Sean might be used to. A little more, synth heavy, and a little more, just that
a lot
sort of
cooler.
A lot cooler, I guess you could say. I think we definitely felt like we needed to do something that was more interesting and would grab people's attention in different ways, and sonically for sure. So, and I think Hawksley picked up on that right away, and he also wanted to make an indie pop record that was gonna. He said so many things, but he wanted to make a new album, and we wanted to come up with a new sound. So I think it was a kind of a perfect relationship that way, that we both were looking to explore.
It sounds like by the in 2020 you put out Endless Nights, but by the time you established this relationship with Hawksley, you were a bit of a different band. You mentioned some changes and stuff like that. Wondering if you can bring our listeners up to speed.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, when we finished Endless Nights, we had so many guitar parts on the record that we felt like we needed to bring these songs, needed to bring them out live, and we couldn't do it with just Sean, as good as he is. So we needed to bring in a little more firepower. So we asked Thomas in 2019.
It was actually just before the album came out. It was the summer before we were kind of planning the release.
He played a few shows with you once.
He did slowly, and then I think we played our first show, and we asked him to join right away. I think Alex made him sign a bar napkin saying he was going to be in the band full time. But and then once Thomas was sort of playing a full time member, we started writing more right away, and he just brings such a different approach and mindset to writing music. Like he wants to create as much sound as possible, not really just straight away guitar stuff, but he's an atmospheric player, and he wants to try and explore as many sounds as possible. And I think we started to implement that in the writing of the music, and of course Thomas had more ideas, and what we were listening to music wise changed when we started hanging out with Thomas more. So we wanted to explore different stuff, and just when you spend that much time together with someone new like that, your approach and mindset's going to change so fast. So it was pretty quickly once Thomas joined the band that we sort of shifted gears into a different sound sonically. It took us a while to get to where we are now, but we definitely wanted to change something.
And then I think it was in like spring or summer of 21, Alex was moving on to plan his move to Spain, which is cool, very cool. No skin off his nose there, because life takes us in different ways. But we were like, well, we need a bassist. Can't get around that one. And we had a few people in mind that we might ask. And I think Joe was the first ask. Immediately, he was like, yeah, I'll do it. And that's the rest is really history. We just, as soon as he moved back to Kingston, we just started pounding the pavement with writing as much as we possibly could, getting used to playing with each other and the different styles that we had to our writing approach. And it was pretty fruitful pretty quickly. None of the demos we made in that time ended up on the record, which is a good thing in hindsight. But yeah, it was the start of what we didn't know at the time was going to be an absolute odyssey of a record production schedule.
Actually, it's interesting that you bring that up because we wanted this to be an Oakridge Avenue podcast episode, but we did chat with Hawksley Workman. Mm-hmm. We know that he was important and integral to the production and the creative collaboration that went on to create the new album, Wind Up Let Go. But we thought it'd be interesting to maybe play some bits of our conversation with him and just maybe maybe I can ask some follow-up questions based on some of his comments. And
can't wait
maybe
to
just
hear
kind
these.
I'm excited. I am nervously excited about this.
Me too.
No, I think he was very complimentary about your skills and the whole process and stuff like that. But you'd mentioned how long it had taken. So John, play the first soundbite here.
I wanted to put myself into a position where I was working really hard to build something that sounded international and sounded ready for a large audience. And I've worked with people who are effective, but you can feel that when they leave that day, when the session's over, they're on to thinking about something else. Like for the year or year and a half that we were working on Oakridge, like I really did drown in it. And I got quite emotional even towards the end of making the record, because it's hard to know, even when you grow accustomed to a record living in your life, even how do you let it go? How do you finish it? Even like why? Like it's perplexing because it takes over your life. And I feel that the best artists and the best stuff gets made by obsessives. I know that in life we're all like, oh, well, there should be a work-life balance, and it's like, yeah, maybe, but in rock and roll, my own research over 25 years, obsessives run the show. If you're a music fan and you're a fan of a name, that person is probably an obsessive. They're probably working 16 hours a day on their thing. They're probably only thinking about their music careers and the songs they're writing. And they're probably thinking about little else. And anybody in the music business, that's kind of how it has to be. I just don't see there being like opportunity for work-life balance in a music career. It's really all or nothing.
So first of all, I was surprised to hear that it took a year and a half to make the record with Hawksley Workman, because that seems like a substantial amount of time and effort invested into an album. Would you characterize Oakridge Avenue as the kind of obsessives that Hawksley described as a requirement for success in music today?
It was the only thing on my mind for 18 months straight, pretty much.
Wow.
It was hard to shake, so much so to the point where he mentioned, he got emotional at the end of making the record. Yeah, it was hard. It was hard to let go. I remember when we left the last session, we were wondering if that was going to be it and if we were done. And when you were working on that for something for so long, you're never going to feel like it's done. And we definitely didn't get that sense of, we wrapped this up. So when, in the coming weeks, when we talked about, if this was going to be it and whether we needed more, whether we wanted to do more, it was hard. I think we were all sort of waiting for that moment of, oh yeah, we got it. But I think we were obsessing over it for so long that we never had that, oh yeah, we got it moment. It just, I don't think any of us really saw the end coming soon. It was just, we'd been doing it for so long. It was just this process that we could have kept going for, I don't know, another 6 months if we had to or whatever. But we definitely obsessed for a long time about it, to the point where I haven't thought about it in a while, but even now I'm thinking about it, I still have a feeling of going back into that, like the memories of going back into that studio. I still feel like we could go back tomorrow and sort of pick up back on that process and keep, coming up with new demos and writing more songs. I think it's a hard switch to turn off in our brains.
Yeah. But there does come a point where it's diminishing returns. And I mean, there's some people who they don't hit that switch and they wind up with double albums and triple albums, and if they're lucky, they have a manager or a record company to say, stop, you're being ridiculous, let's put this out. We don't have that apparatus, so at some point we had to call it done. And like Harrison said, we didn't really have an immediate sense of closure on the songs that we had when we had that last session, but I think in hindsight that there was a good thing in having to come to that realization organically and not having the big hurrah of clinking glasses and saying, yes, it's done.
No, like popping champagne bottles.
Because we learned things about ourselves by doing that. And one of the things we learned was that the 10 songs we left there with wasn't exactly what we wanted. And we made the decision pretty much on a dime. I don't think we told Hawksley until after we had it done. We went to L&M and we rented some $14,000 worth of equipment. We didn't spend that, but that's what the total value of it was. And we banged out a brand new song in 2 days, which it was Baby Don't Self-Destruct, because one of the songs, just for whatever reason, hadn't turned out exactly the way we had envisioned it, though it was still very good and strong, I think. It just, for whatever reason, it was sort of rubbing us the wrong way. And then we cranked this song out in 2 days. We were like, I think we can do this. We had already started talking to the mastering engineer, Carl, and we were like, can you make this sound right to fit in with this record? And he says, yep, I can do it. And he and Thomas worked meticulously together to bring it up to speed. And then after that, I think we really were like, okay, that was the right call to make. It made us all feel that much better about the collection of music that we had. And there wasn't that question mark hovering over that 10th song. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the obsessiveness, like, I was obsessive in my head about it for, like I say, like the entire 18 months we were working on it. It was always on my mind when I was writing. Like I got to a point where we were getting towards the end, and still after each session, Hawks was like, it's probably best if we have another 5 songs. Probably best if we have another 10 songs to pick from. I was like, okay, I'll do this.
The number seemed to grow. It was 5, 10, it was 30 at one point.
Yeah.
We need 30 more songs.
Around about Christmas time, 2022, I remember this because I was writing by Christmas tree lights. I would get myself up an extra hour early before work at like 6 o'clock, 6:30, pour myself a coffee. I'm not a morning person, so this was excruciating.
I can confirm that.
And I would just sit with my notepad and an unplugged electric guitar so as to not wake up my wife, and just try and write. I like forced myself. And the song that came out of that, well, there were a couple, but the main one, the first one, was End of This, which I literally wrote about having writer's block. And I was like basically inspired by all of the times in the past where I had somehow broken out of writer's block, and that broke me out of my current writer's block. It was really cool. I think the other thing that helped was I just randomly, idiotically maybe, decided to write a song in 5/4 time. And I was like, well, this is at least different enough to be inspiring. And I don't think Harrison appreciated that too much, but
It's one of my favorites to play it live, but it did take me probably 2 hours that one afternoon at the cottage of trying to get all the changes. That was a sweater. That was a wood shredder for sure.
Yeah.
Well, now that the album's out, though, is there a sense of relief, a sense of closure?
Absolutely, yeah. Certainly, since we started putting out singles, it started to feel a lot better. There's still always that kind of anxiety about, are people going to get on with the whole collection? Are they going to hear it as a whole the way we do? Right now, I feel better about this music than I have in a while, which is a really nice feeling.
Thank you for listening to Kingston Live. Be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. For more great Kingston music, check out the Kingston Live playlist on Spotify. For show listings, artist info, and all things Kingston music, check out kingstonlive.ca.
I mean, when I came out that day to work with those guys, they're great music fans. And Harrison is like, you want to feel cool, let him DJ your party. You know what I mean? Like, his music taste is unbelievable. So those guys were playing a lot of stuff off of their playlists and going, we like this band, we like this band, we like this band. And at the end of the afternoon of listening together, I said, so what kind of record do we got to make to get on this playlist? Because to me, it sounds like that's what we're going to do. We got to make a record that's every bit as cool as everything you've just played me.
So I have to ask you, did you succeed in creating an album that would make your own playlist, as Hawksley described?
Yeah.
If I put my own music on my playlists, then
no.
Yes. I don't do that, but yes, I would. I think it feels that way.
I'm trying to remember what I would have been listening to that he would have picked up on. I do remember that in our first meeting with Hawksley, somehow we all just sort of, the band Phoenix from France got brought up, and we all sort of latched onto that. And I've been a big Phoenix fan since I was in high school, and I might have played something off their new record, which makes sense. And I think he had maybe just been in a bit of a Phoenix swing, and I remember him saying something like, I want to make a record like those cocky Frenchmen.
Yeah.
Like, where did they get off making something so cool? Like, unbelievable. And we all laughed. And I mean, it's not far off from what we finished with. One of the first reviews I got from one of my friends was, when did Oakridge Ave become Phoenix? And I never really thought about it until I read that message, that how big they were in the early days of us sort of listening and, writing new songs. I guess we definitely got close.
Yeah, and stylistically, obviously, there's a lot of other things happening and whatnot. But I mean, that's always kind of the thing I've been striving towards, is to make music that I would like to listen to. I think, everybody does. Well, not everyone. Some people I know, they make music and they make it because it's in their wheelhouse and it speaks to them, but it's a completely different style from what they would choose to listen to or put on a playlist. But that was definitely the goal for this one, and I think we got as close as we could have managed, given the way that we recorded it, because our influences were changing while making the record, so it wasn't as clear cut as listening to Phoenix and 1975 and Weaker Thans and Biffy Clyro and saying, okay, that's the blueprint. I was late to the game, discovering a band called Last Dinosaurs from Australia, and they're just so freaking cool. I immediately was like, okay, well, this is now I kind of obsessed a little bit, and it really came out on a song called Arrow. I think I sat down at my computer and I was just like, I'm going to write a fast poppy rock song in the style of Last Dinosaurs, and that's sort of pretty much what came out
Feed
of that
that
one.
into Chat GPT.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it wasn't quite as clean cut a plan, but like I say, given the way that it all panned out, I think it worked.
But there was a lot of effort that was put into the record, and you can just hear it in the end product and stuff like that. John, I want you to play soundbite number 4 for the guys here.
The record is great, and I feel like what I asked them to do was to write the best songs they've ever written and no compromise. And I feel they did that. I feel like they took that part seriously. And it was like, look, there are phenomenal bands that come from Kingston. Arguably definitive Canadian rock music comes from Kingston. Whether, the Glorious Sons and the Hip, 2 bands that both no plan B type bands, which is why we love them. We love no plan B type bands. And I said, you got to write a record that's a no plan B record. Like, this has got to be hits only, high energy innovation only, executed at a high level only. Like, you come from Kingston, where a long line of celebrated Canadian institutions are born. Like, even that, it's like, go be Kingston proud. Like, go be that fucking band that the city can go, shit, we've done it again. We've produced another fucking world-class band. Like, woo, what is it about the water? What are we doing here? So I feel like it was some of that. I hope I wasn't too much of a jerk. I don't think I was a jerk. I think in hindsight, I'm realizing that by the end, it was emotional for me, my involvement with that record, because I hadn't produced a record in a long time. I wanted to know that I put my all into this thing. Sometimes when you're making records in Canada, the Canadian thing can be a little bit settle for second best. And I wanted to skip past that settle for second best thing that can sometimes take over a Canadian recording process. And I wanted to make it like, this has to be great. And we are going to have to put the hours in for this thing to be great. And that's all it was.
Yeah, I think what Hawksley is describing is that, well, he at least went all in on this record, Wind Up, Let Go. And from the sounds of it, the band went all in too. He described you as a no plan B band and your potential to be that next great band from Kingston. How do you feel about that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Mildly overwhelmed.
I guess so. We talked about that a lot in the early days in the early sessions and the early back and forths. He always said, you got to have no plan B. If you're trying to get the absolute best out of somebody and you say to them, there's no plan, you have no backup, you have to do this or you're fucked. It's a good way to motivate someone to, get their ass in gear, which it worked. That was definitely.
We were telling ourselves that too. We had some real tense times when we were writing, and you spend that much time with, what are your best buds, but you that amount of time together, that much creative clashing, and we're all working towards the same thing, but we're getting there in slightly different ways and have different ideas, and it was tense at times, and we knew, fortunately, that we were all gunning for the same thing, which was the reason we were able to manage it. But it certainly wasn't easy. It was not a walk in the park.
It's something we hadn't really done before. I mean, when we did Endless Nights, we were away for a lot of recording sessions, but the music that we recorded, we've been playing on the road around everywhere for almost 2 years and even longer. So this was the first time that we actually sat down with not a blank scale, but in the end we had nothing but a couple demos, and then it was the first time we had actually sat down during a session and just wrote songs, which is something I've always wanted to do because that's the way you read about it in books and in movies, but it's definitely not the easiest way to do it. We spent, a year and a half going to practice every week or 2 times a week trying to write a new song and trying to flesh out parts for new songs, and some songs just weren't there, and some songs people clicked with, and some songs, others struggled with, which was not easy. Even, an hour and a half rehearsal trying to find your way through a song that, you don't know well, or you haven't found your place in is extremely exhausting.
It's mentally exhausting as much as physically.
More so than you would think, because, you're still doing your same thing, but you're trying to think about what you're doing and think about how you can make it better, make everything better. It's not easy, and it's taxing after a while, like Sean was saying.
And you can't do it.
You get a tense room after a while if someone loves the song and someone doesn't.
You really can't do it passively either. You were all actively engaged the entire time, and that gets passions hot and tensions can arise, and especially, it depends on, it's different if we all get there and we just start jamming and something really cool starts to happen. It's all of ours at the same time emerging at once. It's different when somebody comes in with a song that they've written, 2/3 of, and they're trying to port it into the band, and maybe they hear it going a certain way, the band hears it slightly differently, or they want to take it a slightly different direction, or it just doesn't click at all. And there were many of those that just we left on the cutting room floor. That was the other thing I wanted to mention, was just that no 2 of the songs that made the record were written in exactly the same way. They all came about very differently. Some of them were co-writes with Hawksley. Some of them were Joe and I did a lot of lyric writing together while we were in Peterborough at the studio. Some of them were ideas that Thomas just came up with at his studio and then showed to us, and some of them we worked out at this cottage getaway. It was really quite sporadic.
We actually asked Hawksley about the creative vision behind the record, and this is what he had to say about that.
It really was about making sure that we streamlined the vision and that we didn't let any of our old habit get in there. Nothing bar bandy, nothing bluesy, nothing that sounded 3-chord rock. Everything had to be sophisticated. Everything had to have the best tone. Honestly, Rob, we had about 35 guitars in the studio, and there'd be parts that'd be we would try 20 guitars. Is this the part? This is the part. Is this the sound? Let's hear another guitar. Try another guitar. Try another guitar. Try another guitar. And it really was just commitment to making sure that we were making the right decisions every time. And we were never relying, resting back on, oh, that's okay. People know us as a bit of a blues thing, so we'll let that go. It's no. This has to be a succinct vision. And I think that everybody got on board for that.
Was it challenging or liberating for you to break from the styles that were so familiar to you?
For me, watching it happen with the melodic guys was great for me to watch. Nothing against what we had used to do, but just watching the 3, Sean and Thomas and Joe, watching their playing evolve throughout the whole course of this was fun to watch, and listening to them get more in tune with what we were trying to do, and everybody watching them all get better was great for me to watch and great for me to listen to. Doesn't change much for me. I do my thing, but watching them and listening to them, and everything, their tones, their guitars, what they're trying to, the music, the guitar players, they're trying to listen to. Watching them shift gears was a fun ride for sure.
For me, it was challenging more at the beginning, because you just, as a guitar player especially, you have instincts, and especially when we played blues rock in bars for 5 years, 6 years, and improv was such a big part of it, so you get so used to going to those comfortable places. So that was an adjustment for me, but it didn't take too long, I think, to really realize that having the constraint of not doing that was actually the thing that took all the constraints off creatively. Like Hawksley said there, just being really intentional and writing the best parts we can, the most melodic things, not reverting back to our muscle memory and whatnot. That was definitely a guiding principle that we all at times struggled with, but overall, I think we overcame it in a pretty strong way. And I heard the best playing I've heard from all the guys throughout these sessions. So that was really, really cool.
Sean, I wanted to ask you, because Rob and I were talking about these clips with Hawksley, and there's that moment where Hawksley talks about trying 20 guitars. And Rob said to me earlier, like, do you really use 20 guitars? And I'm thinking, there's 7 guitars on the wall in the next room here.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to him that
they all
they
sound the same, like more or less.
Yeah, I was saying to Rob, and I think you can probably comment on this better than I can, like all guitars, they all sound a little bit different. They all have their own personality.
Yeah, undoubtedly. My wife doesn't get it still. I don't know if she ever will. But I was showing her all the pictures of the studio, and I was like, we used that. I think we actually did accomplish.
We did a count once. I think we used like 32 out of 34 maybe that were available to us.
Nice.
But yeah, it often was like we would try several different guitars, and maybe your first instinct isn't quite right, or you go back and you go, oh, that Telecaster did that really good major chord jangly thing really well.
They all have their
so
sweet spots.
Let's try that one. And
we definitely found the sweet spot of every single guitar, because once we found the one sound that guitar was used for that, and that happened a lot. I don't think there was one guitar we used more. We used them all for different things pretty much equally. There was, he has a great selection, but I think everything got used. Everything got used.
And then there's the other thing, like Sunburn only exists because of a guitar that was in his studio. He doesn't have it anymore. He bought it on a whim. It was this old PV. It was a PV guitar, like kind of a beater guitar.
Roadster.
He picked it up on Kijiji or something like that, just sort of on a whim. And it was in the studio when I had gone down to do a writing session, and we had got this beat going and, a couple of synth sounds, and I picked it up and I went, and he just turned around in the chair. He was like, I wouldn't have done that, but let's do that. And I was like, okay, cool. And it was literally just the way that the guitar felt and the particular sound that was coming out of it that led to that inspiration. And I still actually kind of struggle to get precisely that tone with my guitars, because it was such a unique sort of one-off instrument.
It's because it didn't stay in tune ever. That's why.
It didn't stay in tune. No,
that was the sweet sound.
But for what we used it for, it was perfect.
It's neat how just that one sound can spark a whole song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that little riff is like at the center of that song. It just draws you right in, sets the whole thing up.
But even just the feel, just the tone can take you in a different direction that you wouldn't have taken otherwise.
Yeah, totally.
We've been talking a lot about your experience working with Hawksley in the studio. We also asked Hawksley about his experience working with the four of you.
That must have been interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe share some of his comments.
I'll say this about Sean in particular, and watching him grow through this process. I watched him catch hold of his confidence, which from a producer standpoint, that's the biggest gift that can come from a process like this, that you can see somebody who is literally a world-class talent learn to believe it. You know what I mean? And I think Sean got there. It was just like over time, and me going, man, you're a world-class talent. Oh, I don't know. And then at the end of it, it's like, dude, only a world-class talent would be writing this kind of music. Like, once you start believing it, you start embodying it. It's one of those fake it till you make it things. Musicians don't always easily come by confidence. But once they get it and hold on to it, sky's the limit. I think it happened for all those guys, but watching Sean in particular, I think in Canada also, we're not inclined to believe our own hype. That's an American kind of thing. And so in the studio, I can be a pretty loud cheerleader for stuff and like rah band. And everybody can be like, oh God, Workman again, like blowing smoke up everybody's asses. But honestly, I want you to leave feeling changed. I want you to leave with an unshakable self-belief. And I think that Sean did that. I think Sean's going to go on to produce more records. I think he's going to produce young Kingston artists. I think he's got that talent.
Sean, how do you feel about that?
It's pretty cool. Yeah. I'm digesting.
Do you feel you really won the confidence that he observed you in?
I definitely did feel a lot more confident coming out of it. I don't know. I still kind of feel, and this is just going to sound like I'm doing like the faux humble thing again, but I kind of, for a long time, have felt quite an intense sense of imposter syndrome. And I get that every big show we play, the people that we get to meet and everything, it's always kind of in the back of my mind. But much less so, I will say, and a lot of that is due to the way that Hawksley sort of pushed me and all of us in the studio and throughout this process. Because like he said, you can't really make music like this if it, I feel very strong about, if you don't believe that you're doing something that's really worthy of that. And